So welcome and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for today's webinar, Technical Guide for Microsoft Azure Solutions for SAP, SAP HANA, and S/4HANA. I'm Kristen Canner, Global Marketing Strategist for Protera Technologies, and I'll be hosting today's webinar. We really appreciate all of you taking time out of your busy schedules to attend today's educational webinar. We hope to answer all of your technical questions for Azure and SAP. We'll be starting the webinar shortly, but I first wanted to go through a few housekeeping notes. Only our presenters' phones are live. Your microphones are muted by default to block any background noise. Our presenters will be answering questions at the conclusion of the webinar. If you have a question, you can type it in at the Q&A function at the end of the webinar on the webinar sidebar. If we don't get to your questions during the presentation, I or another member of the Protera team will be sure to reach out to you directly. And lastly, this webinar will be recorded and I will make the link available to all attendees after the meeting. So let's get started. Now I want to introduce today's presenters, Patrick Osterhaus, and Chief Technology Officer, and Christian Weissman, Vice President of Strategic Alliances.
Thanks, Kristen, for that warm intro.
No problem.
I'm Patrick Osterhaus, Chief Technology Officer for Protera, and wanted to go through the agenda here for today. That's a picture of myself, and there's Christian also. In the agenda here today, we're going to go through just a brief overview of Protera Technologies. We're going to go through the latest news on SAP on Azure, as we say, the State of the Union. And then we'll also look through typical use cases, where to start, and we'll also introduce our FlexBridge migration assessment, which is a tool that we can help you with your journey to the cloud and moving to Azure for your HANA systems. A little bit about Protera. You can see here in the sections, little highlights. We were founded in 1998. We've been focused on SAP for the whole duration. We started as a SAP focused in the basis services area. We've been focused on innovating, bringing new technologies to SAP customers. Most recently, working with the cloud around Azure to bring all the benefits of cloud and how we can best leverage that to the SAP customers in those solutions. And we'll see more about that with the presentation here forthcoming. With the offerings, we'll talk a little bit about our AMS services, what that means, what that all encompasses, as well as some of the important aspects to consider when going to cloud. And as I mentioned already, Protera FlexBridge is an option to accelerate your cloud migration. We are worldwide. We have offices around the world providing 7x24 support. We also are certified by SAP in 5 areas. Soon, next month, we'll get the global certification, which is an audit that checks all of our locations as well as our data centers around the world, providing SAP services. And then also want to mention our tight relationship in partnership with Microsoft, focusing on Azure, as well as SUSE, which is a key component to the HANA stack, which you'll see shortly. And then lastly, our differentiators here, which we'll talk a little more about, is our ITO services delivery platform, our cloud brokerage experiences, which goes back to almost a decade. And then, as I mentioned, our expertise in the SAP space and laser focus on HANA and all the new innovations that SAP is bringing in that space. So a little bit, if you can just take a look at how we would solution an SAP system from the components, we can look at it from a cloud perspective, as well as the hybrid solution where companies will be on-premise and we're going to be connecting their on-premise systems that could have SAP running there, as well as SAP systems or other systems that integrate to SAP running in both private and public cloud. And of course, Azure is the public cloud option. Within this integration, we have this middle piece, which we'll talk to you a little more as our AMS services, and these are the areas that we cover. So we have deep experience with the infrastructure of Azure and the platform services that Azure provides to bring those best capabilities to your SAP solution. But we also fully manage that stack. So within the cloud, the compute, the storage, the network, setting up HA, all that is fully managed within our solution. And then we also manage the database. We do the backups. We make sure monitoring is set appropriately and that any alarms that are triggered for any events are quickly expedited and acted upon by our service desk. We have our own ticketing system. So in many cases, we can become the level 3 help desk or even level 2 for a company's SAP systems and their services. And then on the right side, just to give a sampling of all of the areas that we provide support to and full integration. So obviously, we mentioned SAP, deep experience with SAP stack, including HANA, and also now S4 HANA. And then the other areas with Microsoft Dynamics, other ERP vendors. And then although the integration points, including Active Directory, which is a very important component to Azure for credentials and security, and the other areas like SharePoint, the 365 products include Exchange and Yammer, and then, as I mentioned before, the OSDB support. So a lot of components to the solution that we fully manage that would be under that SAP umbrella for a solution for a company. So part of the solution we call ITO, the full IT outsourcing for SAP, is bringing these areas, these 5 focus areas, and we want to leverage not only what's best about SAP and HANA and memory computing, but we also want to couple all the exponential capabilities that the Azure cloud provides us on top of that. So we are going to leverage those advantages with cloud coupled with the in-memory computing and those improvements that SAP provides. And these are some of the areas that the Azure cloud provides us these great capabilities. So for example, we'll see all the apps that are currently supported for Azure with SAP, but the flexibility around the choice of applications. Azure provides support of many operating systems and the full support of SAP suite of products. In addition to that, the scalability where we can quickly scale up a system or down, even bring it down on the weekends or on the weeknights when they're not used to save money, as well as to be able to scale up the system if we have a HANA system that is growing and we have more users and we're putting more plants onto the system, we can quickly scale that memory up to be able to provision additional horsepower to that solution. And then obviously the agility, which is a very important aspect to cloud. We can quickly deploy systems, bring them up in a few hours. And I'll mention a few case studies here that have showed the value of the agility to be able to move a new customer in the cloud very quickly, as well as migrate their data in a very expedient time. And lastly, built in with the security, all the requirements that SAP has, as well as our certifications around SA16, all this is built in with the full stack, and we fully deploy our solutions around Active Directory and using the best practices that the Azure cloud provides us. And finally, the efficiency is the reducing costs from all these factors. We simplify the solution as well as reducing cost and the complexity to deliver SAP. So a little background to talk about how we've learned the areas of the Azure cloud and the SAP solutions is we've been doing design and the deployment and the running of SAP systems back till 1998. So during these times, we've had a lot of experiences moving full data centers. You know, for many years it was on-premise to on-premise, and then it became on-premise to our data centers, and now it's on-premise going to cloud. So we understand this model and the challenges that SAP customers face, and we've been there through the whole journey. So not just from getting a system that's been up for 5 years and now migrating it to our solution, but also having customers that sign SAP and we did the full install and we ran through the full design and the implementation, the deployment, for multi-year projects, back many years ago. So we understand the complexities, the challenges, and as well as how we can optimize that path to getting you in the cloud, running SAP HANA the very best, the very fastest manner. So we've been doing it for quite a long time. Which brings us to the lines of our business, which we'll talk about the FlexBridge product here later in the deck, which is our solution to accelerate our migration services. So that we'll talk about in the next few slides. Most immediately here in the next few, we'll talk about our AppCare business line. And this is our managed infrastructure. So bringing in companies to provide those best practices and the best service around managing SAP and Azure. We'll talk about that. And then also our professional services, which are the consulting services that if there's a need, some spot work that needs to be done, we're more than happy to help in those areas. So why do companies want to move to the cloud? That's a big question. And on the left side of the slide, we can see some of those drivers. right? All those are good reasons. The agility, reducing the cost, IT transformation, all the blueprint for SAP is to get in the cloud and run it in memory. So we have some good drivers there. The question then becomes in the middle, how do we get there? And so there's a lot of options. There's certainly, we could do a brand new greenfield implementation, even if you already have SAP, and then look at moving that data over separately with a full new implementation. That's certainly an option. What we're seeing more and more, though, is interest around taking existing SAP systems and migrating those to HANA. So we want to have, a company wants to have their 10 or 15 years of data, and now they want to put it in memory database with HANA and have that real-time analytics, be able to capture the real value and see trends and the patterns, from many areas of their business. So that's where it becomes a little more complicated to move that system over in the cloud. So we focused over the last few years on coming up with an automated system, which we call FlexBridge, to automate that process. And we'll talk more about that, but that includes the lift and shift migration, which is in the middle. So you can think of just, moving every byte over, put it in the cloud into Azure, or also this OSDB migration, which is, we're talking about changing not only the operating system and database, but it also could be changing the SAP version, going to HANA, in many more complicated scenarios, which we've figured out, we've automated. So we'll talk about that in the end of the presentation. In this next piece, I'm going to talk about this Protera AppCare and how do we glue these solutions together with public cloud, private cloud, and hybrid cloud. So the way we address this is with a service we call AppCare. It's an SLA-bound agreement. So for a monthly fee, we are binding our services to guaranteed SLA for performance. And it's for, instead of the customer worrying about what storage they're using and performance of their system, we give them an SLA to say guarantee uptime, guarantee performance, and all of these areas of the stack are fully covered. So you can see the operating system, all the basis work, all the expertise required for maintaining the system, optimizing it, any future planning, roadmap items for the company if they're looking to do the next version of HANA, for example, upgrading to version 2, which is now available. That's all included in our service. And with that, we tie in our deep expertise within the cloud Azure platform. So you can see on the bottom, this infrastructure piece is a huge component, the infrastructure and the platform services that Azure provides. So a company that's going to Azure, they're not going to know the best way to integrate Active Directory into Azure, which is a key component to the design and layout and the operations of that system. So we have tight expertise in that, complete expertise, and we would bring that in from the design phase of that implementation. It's also important to note on the top here, we will partner with the company for the functional AMS, so the functional, the business, the business management area, when we're doing an upgrade, the business re-engineering of those processes. We will work with the customer, or many times the customer will bring in a partner. And we have done this many times. We have many partnerships that we work with for migrations and upgrades. So happy to do that. That's our typical way that we would approach the migration. We focus in the technical area, aspects for migration, and we'll partner with the customer or third-party partner to handle the functional areas. As I mentioned, it's a monthly service, and the way that we do it, we try to simplify for the customer, so it's a very easy to understand way that we do support. So the packages you can see here is done by sizing. So for example, if you look at one line, for example, on the large, those are multiple systems, so it's a landscape. So the example here is we have a dev, quality, and a production system, and it's rated at a SAPS rating, which is an estimation of how busy and how large that system has to be. We'll price it out in that level. And as you can see, I mentioned what that all includes. It's basically all the technical aspects to fully host it, all the backups, take care of any optional services like HA and DR. All those are included in that price, as well as maintenance, so doing patches to keep it current. All that is part of the solution, as well as security services and all the things that are consideration for the technical stack. So before I get into some of the Azure specifics for SAP, just wanted to use this slide. It talks a sampling of customers that we've done work, we've hosted, we have hosting. It's this sampling of many large companies that we do, and we actually have a few more slides that we'll for companies that aren't on this list, we will specifically go into how we use the Azure solution for their implementations. So we'll talk in the next few slides on these 3 customers specifically. They are all on the Azure platform, and we can talk to them specifically about attributes of the cloud of what they're each using. And obviously there's many aspects all are capturing, but we'll focus on 3 different areas here for these 3 customers. So the Protera difference, what we bring to the table here is the expertise. So again, the certification of the processes. So we are both ITIL certified as well as the SAP certification, as you can see on the bottom. So what this requires us to do every 2 years is go through our full stack operations. So essentially we get audited much like a financial operations audit. We would go through all the technical requirements. So anything to run an SAP system is going to be looked at thoroughly. So as you can see here, we have it for hosting. So that would look at the data centers that we use. Are they, all compliant, certified, fully compliant around the security areas? And hosting also considers the backups, how we do it. The aging of backups, we offsite the data, looking at the DR rate. So it's very involved, very highly time-intensive audits that we go through every 2 years on these areas. And then also we go through the SA16 audits every year, which is SOC 1 Type 2, and that requires us not only just SAP capabilities, but also around the audit space where how are we keeping up with security and requirements, for areas for that. So it's an area that we take very important to us, and we put a lot of emphasis to focus our operations around that. Number 2 is the Microsoft Azure cloud service provider. So this is something that is part of our partnership. We have to stay up with all the requirements around that, and education of our people. Everyone that would support our stack, our AppCare platform, has to be certified as part of this program. So it's something that we're keeping a tight partnership with Microsoft in the roadmap of Microsoft to learn of new technologies and always continually do their best practices. And as I mentioned before, the SUSE expertise, which the vast majority, I forget the ratio, but it's above 90% of all HANA systems are now running on SUSE. So the market leader is clearly SUSE for the operating system that HANA runs on. And so we want to have continue to learn their roadmap and all their capabilities around the best that HANA provides, for SUSE. So we want to make sure that we keep up and strong on that. And then the cloud brokering is the term that's strong in the industry now. We've been essentially doing this service for many years, and this is the understanding of not just Azure's capabilities, but making sure this runs the best with hybrid solutions. So the customer has their on-premise solutions, making sure that any kind of integration between those on-premise and the Azure systems work, as well as any third-party products that are SaaS-based. So having those integrated as well. There's many add-ons that are a SaaS model that we have to integrate. And lastly, most importantly, from a business standpoint, is to make sure that we keep lockstep with Microsoft, so we understand where the market's going, and we have solutions that are what the customers need and what they're looking for. So very, very important. So I'll shift gears here to the SAP on Azure and the state of the union there, what's available. So essentially, if you go down this list here, it's pretty much all the SAP products are available now on the Azure cloud. So the SAP takes a look at certifying the platform. So they're going to actually look at all the hardware, the operating systems, all those requirements that they would bring in the past to a hardware vendor. They are now bringing those same questions and certifications to the cloud provider. So for Azure, they have to fulfill those requirements to then get certified for these products. So the platform is very well vetted. And from that, there's requirements that are listed in SAP notes, and we're happy to provide those numbers for you if you want to see those. But it gives very specific recommendations on how the system has to be run for production systems. So, and you'll see this momentarily, there's differences for production non-HANA and production HANA versus non-prod for all the systems. So we'll get into that momentarily. So back in Sapphire in May of last year, we had some very big announcements on Azure Cloud for SAP, and that was around the support for 3 terabytes. So this is for scale up. So for the OLTP, that is going to be for the ECC system, or for also for SRM, CRM, SEM. They consider that the business suite. They can all scale up now to 3 terabytes. So that's going to be, I don't have an exact number, but from the customers we see, I would say it's a good 90% of the market would run within that 3 terabyte size. So it's a vast majority of customers can easily run most of their SAP systems today in the Azure cloud. And that over the last year has grown dramatically. And I'm not privy to any roadmap of where that number is going to go, but I have full confidence it's going to grow in the future much larger. So point being is, if there's a company that is right at the cusp of going over 3 terabytes, have confidence that we could design the system now for future growth, and then we'd scale up to that future number, what's available, in the next few months. And then also for the scale out, so this OLAP, this talks to BI. So within scale out, we pair many VMs together to scale this and combine these systems together. And right now that's up to 32 terabytes, which is a monstrous BI system. And there's, matter of fact, one of our customers is doing this in the Azure cloud now. So that is not only shown here, but it's in production. So as mentioned, there's standard solutions that SAP provides that are certified. So we would look at the SAPS rating. If you look at how your SAP systems are sized, you'll get a value to that, which we call the SAPS. And that number then is driven by the capabilities of the CPU and also the storage of that system. So within the standard storage, we can fulfill these numbers. Now, within the non-HANA systems, we would probably go to this next set of solutions here, which is the premium storage. So as you can see, the SAPS values increase dramatically, as well as the I/O, the speed of that. And the step up in price is not much between the standards and the premium storage. So this is our most likely place where we'll put non-HANA systems. And then lastly, this next set of systems are what's certified for HANA and also for S4. So you can see here, we can quickly scale up here. You can see that 3 terabytes. That's the use cases are shown there for Business Suite versus BI, and how much we can grow those systems. And good reminder is that with BW, we can scale that out. So it's not 1.5 is the limit. We can go up to the 32 terabytes. So there's a lot of options for any sizing a customer has for HANA or S4 HANA for Azure. All right, so let's go into back to these customers, which I mentioned on the previous slide about the use cases specific for Azure for these SAP customers. And you can see here, we'll go into each one in detail. So for these 3 categories, we talked a little bit about the HANA migrations. We'll talk more about this as well as the OS migrations, how we do that here at the end of the deck here. But this is a big consideration of companies that have SAP already and how they're going to move that data over to the cloud. So this year, Tate and Lyle came to us and with their SAP systems moving to cloud, want to capture the savings, the agility that cloud provides, as well as going to HANA. So that, as well as moving operating systems that in systems on SAP that currently are on premise, moving those to the cloud also. So they had not only their SAP systems, but non-SAP were going to Azure for all the right reasons, for the scalability, resilience of the cloud, as well as the cost savings. So that is actually going live very soon. The dev and qualities are already built, and we're doing production here momentarily, very, very shortly. So that's going to be live here, full landscape, full production here in the next few days. These other systems, and we can maybe talk, I'll go from right to left on this one. When we first started working with cloud, we saw the most interest with DR. And the big advantage, if you haven't used cloud systems for SAP yet, this is a great place to start, because it's I think one of the most inherent benefits of cloud is around DR, and it's around being able to quickly synchronize and build a system that's a copy of production, and then also scale that system down to a smaller size, because it doesn't have to be run at production sizes, so you can save money on the cost of it. And then you can copy that system, which is replicated at all times, into test systems. So it gives you a very good, robust, highly available DR system for very low cost. And it also lets you, dip your toe in the pool here to try cloud and see the advantages of how you can bring it to your SAP landscape. So what we've seen for, as this mentions, the mostly, great fit for this initially was the mid-sized organizations that didn't even have a DR system. Our very first system that we put in cloud DR was a company that's running SAP 3.1. They never had DR. It was never in their roadmap. They didn't think they could afford it. And so with cloud and the savings that it provides, we were able to build a solution even on SAP 3.1 as Oracle 9, which are very old versions. We were able to extend DR in the cloud to that solution. And now they've had DR for many, many years and capturing, the protection it provides. So it's a good place to start. ChromoFlow is using that they have Windows SQL that's fully replicating over to Azure. And they have had SAP for about 5 years. And in the last year, they've added a DR to it in Azure. So that the non-production systems, I'll go here to the middle now, that's the capability to quickly build systems on the fly. And I'll use SUSE as an example because we have a lot of tight development efforts with FlexBridge in our migration tool set that we use with the SUSE product line. So if you have SUSE as an operating system already, you can actually get our FlexBridge software as what they call an RPM. It's actually built into the operating system. And so we've actually, the prototypes, all the builds that we've done for FlexBridge ourselves, we put into Azure on SUSE, and we were using that as the prototypes, for the builds for SUSE with the new release of their operating system 12.1, which we have FlexBridge built into it. So it's a homegrown example of using many systems for testing very quickly. We can bring them up, we can copy them, we build development on one version, we test it out, and we can make another copy and test out another thread very easily. So highly recommend it. In this case, the example we're using is for development for SAP systems, but this could work, for any environment you have for non-production. So it's a great fit. And then lastly, I'll talk about Elevance. And Elevance is a company that is based in Minnesota. They've had SAP for many, many years. We've hosted them and saw the advantages of the Azure cloud. And so not only did they move production over, they moved their full landscape, but it's also a good example on migration. So we actually were able to migrate all their landscapes, and they had minimal downtime, a few minutes downtime to do their production move over to the cloud. So it's a very good example of full production landscape, capturing the value of cloud with minimal downtime to do the move from a hosting solution. So very, 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 very good example. So let's go back to this slide here, and this is, we talk about the middle and where to start. So the new deployment might be the simplest from a move standpoint, but it's certainly going to be a lot of time. It's going to be very expensive because you're essentially starting over. But that certainly is an option, and some companies are doing that for S4, where they'll have a new S4 landscape running in conjunction with HANA. That's certainly an option. What we're seeing more interest, though, is around taking those existing ECC systems or BI and moving it to HANA in the cloud. So this is where we get into this approach on the bottom, is to do an OSDB migration. So again, I'll bring up FlexBridge as an introduction, and we'll now talk about that more in detail. So if there's one slide that talks to FlexBridge, this would be the high-level summary. And what we've built for this SAP migration to HANA in the cloud is a solution that is not just software-based. That's certainly a big component to it, but it's also the methodology and the best practices that we've learned over the last 20 years of doing migrations of data centers and moving on-premise to another data center for a customer. All the accelerators that we can do on moving compute from one place to another. So we've bundled all those ideas and the best practices into a software solution. And it's not just, you go click, download this from the cloud and you run it. We have a service we call FlexBridge migration experts, which are going to be the point of contact for the customer to us to do the full migration. So we use this tool set as a hub. It's not just interacting with software to be able to do this, because it's a very complicated procedure, as well as there's got to be integration with the customer to plan out the migrations, make sure that testing's done properly. So we ensure that that area is being considered also. What this migration covers is all these areas. So we can do this in one step. So the focus here on the bottom about one downtime, one testing cycle. We can migrate a company, for example, if they're on Unix today and they want to go to SUSE Linux on Azure, that's part of the migration. We can also migrate the customer to different databases. So for example, we can migrate a customer to SQL using this tool set, or we can migrate them to HANA as another database. We can do the SAP upgrade. So for example, a lot of companies are running ECC6, and there's the subversion of that's enhanced with package 3, which is very common. A lot of companies are there. They can go to the latest version of SAP, which is enhanced with package 8. They can do that in this same one step. And then lastly, you know, the talk here today is to do the cloud migration. They can do this cloud migration all within this one approach. And it's very important. This is the most important part of the solution, is it's just one step. So companies today are doing the migration to cloud and then doing their SAP upgrade, or they're doing the SAP upgrade, then moving to cloud. They're doing it in 1 to maybe even 3 pieces. And these projects could be 6 to 12 months each part. What we recommend using the solution is we do it all in one project, one testing cycle, and huge time and cost savings involved there. So that's the big message. So how we start is we actually have a migration assessment report, and we'll talk a little bit more about how we get that here in this next slide. So it's pretty painless, pretty quick. You're gonna go out to our website and you register to get the report. And this report is an ABAP program. It's read-only. You can actually see the source code. We can provide it for you. We can give you a transport. That's how customers introduce new development into their systems. And when they execute this, it will take between 1 and 5 minutes to run, depending upon the size of the system. After those minutes complete, they're going to get this output in step 3. And it's a text file, as you can see. The format's XML, so it's formatted so we can read it in our computers. And once we have that sent back to us, we're going to generate a report within minutes, and we'll go through that, with the customer. We'll go through the whole report and the assessment of what their migration to HANA looks like on Azure. So a little bit about the assessment. It's from a high level. It's going to give an executive summary, and in this summary, it's going to talk about the approach, some of our best practices, some of the timelines required. It's going to talk specifically around downtime, which is a huge consideration when we do these migrations and the conversion. We want to make sure that the system's not down for 3 days, which is very common when we talk about HANA migrations today. So we are going to minimize the downtime as best we can, and we can talk about some of the accelerators that we provide that's built into the software and the solution. So that's going to be in the report. We're going to give estimations on downtime just from seeing the system from this assessment, as well as we're going to go through the overview, so our approach. So for example, a recommended approach is we would first do a proof of concept, which would be a copy of your production environment, and then we'll do a development and then production. We certainly are flexible on timelines. We certainly can add more tests in there if the customer wants, but this will be our generic assessment recommendation. And then we'll go through a very specific proposed solution for the customer. So around Azure, we're going to go through the exact size of the instances. We're going to go through the pricing for those. So customer will have a very good view of what their target environment is going to look like and how it will be architected. And then lastly, part of the report, we go a little introduction about Protera, just so it's well known, our strengths, what we focus upon, as well as in the appendices, we talk about the benefits of the cloud if customers not aware, and also specific around Microsoft Azure, just to understand some of the terminology and how the solution's been architected. So a little bit about, when you see this report, it's your data. You're going to see what is in your system. So it's going to check all these as considerations for doing the migration. These are all key pieces to see if possibly an upgrade has to occur, maybe some patching on your SAP system. Many customers don't know to migrate to HANA, you can't have the Java system running on that same system. So we recommend any remediation steps and things you have to look at. So that's part of the report. The key focus on this report is around this, the top 2 sections. If we talk about the project management and the basis technical areas. So this report's going to talk to those areas specifically. Now, it's important to note, as any kind of migration, any kind of upgrade project, we still need that functional help from the customer, from their partner. So that that third row there, that's an area that, obviously we'll talk with the customer on areas that we need help with, be it the customer or the partner, but that's an important piece that in conjunction with our services and what the assessment's going to say, we need some help on that third level. So just important to bring this out when we talk about migrations. So as part of this assessment, we're going to talk to an example here, and this is going to be a sample landscape. So when we talk about moving a proof of concept system over to HANA, so let's say you're interested, we do the assessment, we're going to put the proof of concept system in. What's the next steps? So the involvement from the customer actually can be very minimal. This number one, the first part we got to look at is just the connectivity. And the express route is a dedicated connection, and it's certainly recommended for production systems. Yet for customers that are just dipping their toe in the Azure cloud, they don't need to have that day one. We can just do a VPN. So we're going to need some help from the customer networking team to set up a VPN. And from the cost, from the standpoint of Azure, there's no cost associated with that internet connection. So it's a very low cost, very quick way that we can connect on-premise systems to the cloud here. So that's the first step. And then we're going to look at, this is the sizing report. We'll size exactly those systems you're going to need, how big they're going to be, how they should be architected, how they're going to talk to each other. And you're going to see the exact sizing and numbers, and you'll have the exact pricing for that. So that's going to be part of the report. Again, recommendations, best practices. So for those HANA systems, we need that SSD storage. That's going to be part of the recommendations. And then there's also going to be the capability for app servers, taking advantage of the agility of the cloud, scaling up, scaling down. There's certainly capabilities here where if you have a seasonal business, we can make that recommendation and take advantage of the Azure cloud. And lastly, we'll make recommendations on backup as well as DR and HA. Those are all additional features here that we can talk to and architect that full solution. And again, the advantages here on moving to cloud, we can bring systems down when we don't need them. So nice summary slide. These are the different types of systems available in Azure. Many different solutions as the workload type shows here on the left side. Many different solutions available from SAP, and Azure has a product that fulfills that. So the node sizes here, you can see different sizes, and we will help architect which is the right one. Many choices, what's the best fit? Our assessment report will answer that. So this slide shows how you can get the assessment report. Again, if you go off to our website too, that's one good way you can go and register. You'll see some press release around that. You'll see a high-level YouTube video that summarizes, what we're doing with FlexBridge, and it's a good high-level summary of it. And then lastly, we'd also encourage you to sign up for our upcoming webinars. We have one on DR for SAP Microsoft Azure. We have one that's going to be focused on driving efficiencies, cost, minimizing the downtime. This is around migrations. And then lastly, we're going to have the best practices learned from the customer success story. One that I mentioned already previous slide here, Elevance. That'll be a good one to talk about real world, capture value that we got off that project. All right, I'll turn over to Mr. Christian. I think we do the Q&A section.
Sounds great. Thanks, Patrick.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you, Kristen.
Christian, do you want to kick off any questions that are coming in? So I don't know if anyone has questions. They can.
Certainly, I can read the ones that I have. So
sure. Yeah, let's go through those. And if anyone else additional on the phone has any other questions, keep typing those into the Q&A, and we will try to get to them. Thanks again, Patrick. That was a very, very informative webinar.
Oh, thank you. And I know we got just a few minutes, so I'll go through the ones we got as long as time suffices. We'll go through them. So
perfect.
The first one I have is we are currently running our SAP systems on legacy Unix. If we transition to Azure, which OS would you recommend we should run on? So that question, as mentioned in the deck, the fortunate answer is that there's a lot of choices. And if the customer is going to HANA, the recommendation we would have is to go to SUSE Linux. That's where, with our tight partnership with SUSE, we keep with their roadmap, and they've come up with some amazing new technologies, especially around live patching. So with live patching, we can actually enable the patching of SAP environments for the operating system while SAP is still up. So it's a very, very key feature. It's a nice way to stay compliant with any of your security patches, as well as as any requirements to keep your environment secure and keep it current. So I certainly recommend SUSE Linux for HANA. Now, if it's not a HANA system, we certainly would recommend, we have a lot of Windows environments. If it's a SQL Server environment, certainly runs wonderfully on Azure, so that those non-HANA environments can certainly run on Windows. So that would be our two recommendations. The next question here is, in a lift and shift Azure migration, we have SAP on Windows SQL. What are the key factors to consider to reduce the production downtime? So this is the exact example we had for Elevance. So Elevance had Windows SQL. They had, they were with us as a hosting provider, and the way that we created their system, there's many options, but we actually created a production system and development and quality as how you would set up a DR system. So we literally would take a backup of the system and we then replicate that over to the target. So the nice feature of this is we can turn those systems on with minimal interruption down to minutes. And the nice thing is we can make copies of it anytime and test it out. So that's the best recommendation, simple way to spin up a new environment, go to cloud. But the key part here, though, is it's going to be lift and shift. To do DR scenario, the lift and shift, there's no changes on the operating system and SAP in the database, all staying the same. We're just re-platforming it to Azure. But that's a wonderful way to do it. Okay, another one came through here. It's actually a two-parter. So our SAP systems, ECC and ODI, are on Oracle and Solaris. Are there technical prerequisites for migrating from Oracle to SQL? How would your migration tool migrate our systems to MS SQL and Azure? So the technical prereqs are going to be that assessment report. There's a lot of considerations we have to look at. So it's going to be versions of OS, version of database, SAP, if it's Unicode or not. So that assessment report will pull out all those requirements and identify them as issues or not and how to remediate it. So that's the first part. So there's many prereqs actually. The second part of that question is around how would the migration tool migrate our system to people. So the way we do this is we push the vast majority of migration into uptime. There is still a downtime portion which we optimize. Our target is always under 12 hours. Obviously, that's for a very large system. Our hope would be we minimize as much as possible. So that's something we would look at your system, seeing what's running, and we make a recommendation on downtime. But that that's the short answer, I guess, on it. Another question. So we have ECC and BW in our data center. Could we move BW to Azure and keep ECC in place? So it's basically, can we split it off and have hybrid? So that's the question, I guess. So the short answer is yes, certainly. A lot of companies actually have new systems they put into Azure. Instead of building on premise, if they have anything new, they'll build it into the cloud first. And then the concern is around latency. So it's certainly a consideration. We haven't had issues as long as it's architected properly. The distance is going to be of concern. So within the US is not a big concern of latency, even for high traffic, as long as the connection is sufficient. But that would be one area you want to look at. But we've seen this work even with companies that have BobJ, and it's talking to ECC. They have it actually in the cloud and on-premise ECC. So latency can be an issue, but as long as there's sufficient bandwidth and there's not that much data going back and forth, it's just something that has to be considered. But it certainly works in the scenarios that we've tested. So it's just make sure that network connection is has an SLA on it, not just VPN, and to make sure that you got sufficient bandwidth. And I think there's one more here coming through. That's please elaborate on the Azure DR options. After a disaster, how does the fallback from DR systems on Azure look like? So it's a good question. So what we have today, we've talked about, is the focus around on-premise to cloud. So in that scenario today, the fallback would be, we would basically have to set up a scenario to go back, like on DR, back to on-premise. So there would be a minimal outage, but there would be some time to rebuild that system. I'll say reseed it back on the on-premise environment. Now, if, let's say in the future, you have Azure as your prod and you have DR in Azure, then it becomes much easier. That's the preferred place to be, is have prod in Azure, and you can take advantage of all these magical options in the cloud. But for today, if a company's got on-premise prod and they're replicated to Azure for DR, it's a little more work where you have to reseed it. There's a little more time involved, but again, we can minimize the outage and help on that. So I think those are all the questions that came in, and then there's actually one that just popped in here last minute. Does your offering include migrating from ERP6 on-premise to S4 in the MS Azure cloud, or just migrating existing ERP HANA Azure to the MS cloud? So it's certainly, that is exactly in our wheelhouse. So going from ERP6 to HANA is exactly what FlexBridge was designed for. Is specifically around going to HANA. And it's not part of this presentation. If you're interested, we can provide more information on all the versions that's supported. And it's actually quite surprising of what can go directly to HANA. There's actually a version of 4, I think it's 4.7 that can go directly to HANA. All of version 5, all of version 6. So it's vast. So yes, we certainly can help there. Going from ECP to HANA in Azure, that's in our wheelhouse. And I think that's all the ones that are there.
Yeah, looks like it. Awesome. If anyone else has any other questions, you can type them in now. Otherwise, again, we just encourage you to sign up for the FlexBridge assessment. We'll have a link provided to all attendees at the end of this, as well as the recording and the slides presentation will be out on our main landing page. It looks like that's about it. Patrick, did you have anything else to conclude for today?
No, thanks everyone for your time. It will be on YouTube soon. So if there's any parts you wanted to go back or ask questions, you know how to reach us. So thank you so much for everyone's time.
Perfect. Thanks again, and I hope to see you on the next webinar.